strong, Doc, what you just said. It's so strong. And I just think about my own life, right? Because in the end, the one finger goes out, but three come back at me. I think of my
Right.
own life, Doc, and think about how much energy I put into either protective things or, putting up barriers so that I don't get wounded anymore, or putting up some kind of a facade to show that I'm all strong and all that when there's probably not a lot of that going on. That's powerful because in the end, Doc, I think at least what I receive from what you just said about energy being directed towards protection versus towards the patterns that develop wellness. Uh, to me, it comes down to this big word that we use a lot, vulnerability, and it's been so misused, so misunderstood. But really, what it means is malleable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it mean that you? I remember long ago, I read a book. I've read you between the two of us. I've said this to you many times. Can you imagine how many books between the two of us we've read? I mean, it's not even a. We're not saying that to brag.
Don't I wish I could remember them all quickly and easily?
We're not saying that to brag, so don't take that. It's just this has been our life, okay? But I remember this thread. This guy said that if you just allow ideas to light, and how the power of one thread of a thought can unwind a lot of difficulty. Doc, let's go up the ladder. I love the work we do. We started with this idea of fragile. Humans can be fragile. You then rightly said, but humans are resilient, capable, strong, and humans can withstand incredible down pressure and up pressure and inner pressure. And then we talked about the fact that in the work that we do, we work with disentanglement, and then you use the word labeling and proper language and how that provides pathways or breadcrumbs that we can start to make diagnoses or make determinations at least. Okay, and from there we started to talk about pushback because pushback is such a powerful thing. And then you said, and I love this phrase, I love this line, it's going to be attached in my mind now, that if you spent the exact same energy, if you twist it on the positive side, working towards wellness as you do holding on to the brokenness, my goodness, that's power.
Yeah. It's whether you're parents concerned about their child and they're watching, or a spouse, or a brother or sister seeing their sibling struggle with addiction. I mean, there's all these things that we have the capacity to do, but our perspective skews it. I'm reminded of, okay, sitting in leading substance abuse groups, that people miss meetings, and it's always a fun moment when I see this. I always get a chuckle comes when someone says, "Well, I couldn't make it to group because it was raining," or and another group member says, "Well, how many times did you walk in the rain to go get your methamphetamine?" And so they're calling one another out, basically saying, no, you had capacity. You were not, the weather did not make you fragile. You just perceived fragility and therefore relented and did not pursue. However, they have used great measures of strength to go after substances at great cost to them. And they're asking the question, are you willing to make that same kind of cost investment in sobriety? So we circle back around to, are you willing to get well today? And are you willing to pay the price to get well today? And here's what I think might be the fallacy in our culture that is holding a lot of people back. The fallacy in our culture that's holding people back could be this: that choices bring healing. choices, that when you have the more choices you have, the healthier you would be. I don't know, maybe that's not true, because I do realize when we narrow choice, when it comes to emotional health, when we narrow choice, people are able to actually focus, get better, direct energy. So many things happen. I wonder if that's not why God sent people to the desert to limit choices. Um,
Well,
so,
immediately, Doc, I started to think about athletes. I'm not an athlete. I try to be, but I've never been good enough as an athlete. I'm just a fighter and a scrapper. But I think about the great athletes when you were talking about narrowing choices. I
mhm.
think about what they say about their lives, the limitations that they enforce and impose upon themselves, and the regimen that they impose upon themselves, and the rigidity with which they do that. Or a musician, great musicians, and the discipline that they have to run scales and figure out meter and to be able to work on rhythm. I think about these things. I'm a writer, and the hours and hours and hours and weeks and months and decades now that I've been writing, and I believe, and I really believe this stuff, that one of the pathways towards human uh, the realizing human potentiality is through the discipline that these things bring when you narrow your choice field and you choose to plow deep, and not wide but deep, into that vein of, or whatever it is that God has given you as your principal task or challenge in life. How do you receive that? I believe that with everything in my soul.
I mean, I think that boy, I would get on that bandwagon. That self-imposed limitations for sure are the things that cause us to thrive. Um, when we can focus, we dig in, we narrow our energy, and therefore we double and sometimes triple the outcomes. So that would probably involve another big value for me is autonomy, is the capacity to engage in that. So the healthiest of a human being is the one who can limit themselves autonomously. Um, I think sometimes when our emotional health gets so poor, or our mental health gets so poor, we we have to have external consequences or relationships that begin to impose those limitations so that there can be a redirection. Um, and I'm thinking this in terms of how God designed the universe, how things just work. And as I kind of, check this idea in my brain bank of experience, I think, wait a minute, I think this might be exactly right. This self-imposed limitations. I mean, there's a part of me that when I say, oh, we have too many choices. Too many choices is bad. There's a part of me that says, wait a minute, I thought resourcing people was like a good thing. Let's provide them resources. Um, so I don't want to land on this with absoluteness. I think that someone that doesn't have a lot of resources may in fact have some challenges. However, over resourcing people, they just spend time jumping from one thing to the next and they never get anywhere. They never effectively use their resource. Um, and they end up fighting against their resources. Uh, when I was actually part of a church planting team, and we were looking where to plant a church, and we ended up kind of keep getting to this kind of middle class neighborhood, and that kind of was against our thinking because Jesus loves the poor. And I thought that's kind of where we would be. And where it seemed like everything was pointing to was not in a poor neighborhood. And I just began to drive around and pray in that neighborhood and say, Lord, is this really where we're supposed to be? So I was praying, and uh, I started just becoming aware of all the pain that was behind those closed doors of those beautiful homes. But because they had so much resource, they were hidden. And I kind of went with that as an answer of yes. And that is exactly what I discovered. So much pain, so much dysfunction, not that because they had so much resource, it just was hidden. You know, those that were in poverty or had less could not hide their brokenness the same way. And so one was hidden, one was unhidden. And so choice options are not always, more resources are not always your friend when it comes to being healthy.
So, fragility. Humans are fragile or can be fragile, right?
Mm-hmm.
You attest,
At least from perspective.
okay?
All
Then,
right.
then
Yeah.
yeah, then you attest humans are also resilient. They're also incredibly capable of withstanding all kinds of difficulty. Then we talked about the fact that not only is that the case, but they can withstand a lot of pounding and live in difficult, if not seemingly impossible settings. Then we talked about disentanglement and just the idea of bringing proper language and separation. I'm a big separation guy to what it is that brought them there so that we can have observation. I believe in, being able to observe from a distant what it is that you're staring down. Then we talked a great deal about pushback and how people resist. And you rightly said, put your energy, as much energy, if not more, into getting better than you do into staying where you're at. I love that idea. Then we talked about and addressed the idea of how it is that people resist, and they resist with sometimes with a bounty, don't they? They decide to do that with, a great deal of
Oh,
alacrity.
yeah.
Let's use that word, okay?
There
They
you
like
go.
it, okay? And from there, we come to this moment where that we start to think about the second uh, big idea that we have in Canopy, and Canopy is conversations that are compelling on emotional care, and that is this idea of personal development, Doc. And at the at the pyramid, if you build this developmental pyramid, and at the bottom for us is impressions. People have been impressed upon to either behave or think or react or live the way that they do. And as you start to look at impressions, and especially from the therapeutic lens, one of the things I work towards is to work with that client or that institution or that church or that group, wherever God lands me in that therapeutic encounter, is to remind them that just because the impression has been guided, has been, the thing that was their compass heading to this date, does not mean that it necessarily is either accurate or should be continued to be followed in their life. And
Mm-hmm.
impressions can change and evolve. How do you receive that, sir?
Yeah, I think that how we see ourselves and see the world. Um, I probably am going to end today thinking more about, rather than saying that human beings are fragile, that they are complex,
Like that one.
and that they over because they're complex. There's so many variants going on in the human mind and the human experience, and that complexity, we can micro focus on things that are not helpful. You know, the blaring word that is in my mind right this moment is self pity. When I have felt sorry for myself, I can have used lots of energy that goes to nothing profitable. Um, and and I think people that are dealing with mental health and behavioral compulsions that are negative, broken lifestyles, that they those that overcome almost always have a self-pity story of how they were immobilized by self-pity and how much energy they put into self-pity, and and that they had to of course they're saying, and I like it, get off the pity pot, you know, and they had to stand up and say, this is where I am, and I have value. And so I want to make sure that anybody that would listen to this would not think that I mean self-pity is any kind of self-deprecation. Um, Feeling sorry for yourself is a distorted view of, of responsibility, a distorted view of the world, distorted view of opportunity. Um, and it really is kind of just reveling. It's gaining emotional energy from feeling sorry for yourself. That's not self-compassion. You know, when you have compassion for yourself, you are, or kindness for yourself, you're saying, look, this is hard and it's okay that it's hard. That's not self-pity. Self-pity says this is hard and it's not fair.
Let's talk
It
about
shouldn't.
let's hover here. I love this. So on the impression levels, self
Mm-hmm.
pity, you don't have to stay there, right?
Right.
The next one is that do hard things, right? Hard things are not necessarily bad for you. They are, in fact, helpful for you. I'm always thinking and trying to bring it back down to the ground level of therapeutic encounters that you and I do, as a part of our life and as a part of our workflow. And so when people come into our therapeutic setting, Doc, they have all these wrong-headed thoughts, don't they? Self-pity. I'm a victim. They did this to me. Somehow I was, caught up in this thing. And some of that can be true. We're not silly men. We
Oh
understand
yeah.
that some of that can be true. But when we work with someone, we help them to see that they can gain and reclaim some responsibility for their life, maybe in measure or margin, Doc. The next thing I love what you just said is that you can start to take hold. Maybe not fully, maybe not completely, maybe not, to the extent that maybe Einstein did at his zenith of his days, but you can start to take hold. What are some other impressions that we have to stare down and see if we can string out a litany here, Doc, of things that we encounter when we see how people have uh, either allowed their life to get to the place that it is, or that it has brought them to the place that it is. What are some other things that you see on a regular basis, that a reoccurring basis from person to person, setting to setting, kind of a thing?
Other things that make it difficult. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other things that make it difficult. Um, I I think the belief that things should not be hard, um, and that if things are hard, it's because it's bad. Um, Things should not be hard, and if they do, they are. It's because things are bad. I think that might be a false belief that is an impression that people have that inhibits their healing. definitely has inhibited mine. I mean, the number of times I have thought, wow, this shouldn't be this hard. And then I now have a check in my mind, like, wait a minute, some things are hard, and hard things create good character. Hard things improve you. Hard things actually are what make you strong. So um, just do the hard thing. Uh, so that sense of I can't, I can't. Uh,
Doc, again, we hear it so often, don't we? And my response is always say, don't say can't, say won't. That's how I refute that, Doc.
mhm.
Don't say
Yeah.
can't, say won't. And then they are always, kind of bristly when I say that, even if they've been seeing me a long time or a short time. And I just say, no, you can, maybe you won't. Let's try to. So can't. Where I'm trying to dig today, the hill I'm investing in is the
Mhm.
things that are the barriers to self improvement, Doc. And the belief systems and the word patterns and the substance abuse things that we see and the family conflicts and the financial difficulty and health concerns and potentially people that have just made poor choices over poor choices that have left them in this kind of compromised position. These are the kind of things that I think about, Doc, when I start to imagine the impressions that have come into a person's life that, if you will, have shaped them partially, if not fully, and gotten them to the place where that they're willing at least to consider a therapeutic encounter. And maybe it's been forced upon them. Maybe they've come to the place where they are no longer have choice power, Doc. You and I deal with people that don't have choice power anymore, don't we? Where that
Mhm.
people are forced, are forced to see us. So those are the kind of things that I want to address and I want to point out and I want to reassure anyone that comes in contact with us that these are common to the human experience, but they don't have to be the things that stop you from getting better. I want people to know that, Doc.
Right. Others that come to my mind is anything wrapped in hate.
Mm.
So self pity, I can't, it shouldn't be hard, I hate. Put whatever you put, even if you hate evil, just put whatever. Hatred um, is the antithesis of health. And we limit ourselves when we hate. So if we limit ourselves when we hate, um, then we are not going to get better. And and I think we can say this broadly, and not to be misunderstood, that there aren't things that might be worthy of being hated. There might be evil. I'm not of the belief that evil does not exist. I think evil exists. I think there are hideous things that are out there. And unjust things, and so evil, unjust, hideous, uh, things that should be labeled like that. But even those things, I don't have to hate them. All right. I can love righteousness. I can love justice. I can love peace. So my perspective, or anyone's perspective, I don't want to elevate myself as like this person has arrived, but when my focus is on hating something versus what I need to love, I actually weaken who I am. I lock myself into changeless patterns. Working with a client right now who does not want to resolve trauma in their life. And we begin to work through it, and they bring it to a halt. They tell me to stop, so I stop. And they're like, I am not going to get rid of that hatred. because that hatred is going to compel me to do better, better on the football field and become better than all these other people. And I froze and I said, that's your goal, is just to be better than everybody else around you? Absolutely, is their response. And I'm like, that's going to be lonely. And I don't know that that's even possible, for you to be better than everybody else. So that particular client's holding on to hate. And we could probably apply this culturally to groups that hold on to hate. For sure, you and I could probably think about church settings where we have been in, where there's been offense and people are holding on to offense and it's turned into hatred or to bitterness. Bitterness is that slow, dulled, hidden hate. And how that organization doesn't thrive, or family systems that are driven and based on that. So I think that I hate would be another one I would put in there alongside of I can't and self-pity, that are impressions about ourselves in the world that keep us from changing.
So today has been about fragility of the human spirit. You call it the complex human spirit. I like that word
Mm-hmm.
better, perhaps, but I like it a lot. Choice power, and how choice power is not always a positive remedy. Okay,
Especially
uh,
when it's having lots of choices.
you know,
I think choice power in the sense of, okay, here's A, B, and C. You choose. But when you go, here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and you have to choose, that's overwhelming.
then we talked about disentanglement, the idea that the person in the therapeutic setting, we work to disentangle them from their issues. Then we talked about labeling and languaging, and how we work hard to give words to create proper piles. I still can't find the word that you use, but we're going
I
to
know
find it
we're
and come
we're
back.
just not getting to what that pile analogy was in a previous
We'll
conversation.
we'll find it again, I promise. So then we talked about language and labeling and piling, and how, again, this disentanglement thing. Then we worked hard on the idea of pushback, Doc. Pushback is a real thing, and people encounter it. And you rightly said, invest more energy into the process of getting better than you do into staying where you are, or into what got you into this setting. Great
Mm-hmm.
line. I'll remember that a long time. Then we talked about the ideas of impressions, and how people come to us and they have this kind of catalog of misnomers. This is bad language, Doc. Bad ideas that have either been bred into them or they've encountered and come to believe, and how those beliefs are really not just limiting but can be crushing. And we enumerated some of them, not all of them. But the idea then that you kind of closed off with, and I love this closing thought, is
Mm-hmm.
that love is the conquering energy. And it brings me back to unconditional positive self regard, which is one of the principles of my life when I'm working with human beings or institutions or groups. Unconditional positive self regard. And what does that mean, Doc? We'll don't have time today to address that, but in sessions coming along, we're certainly going to look into unconditional positive self regard and what it means as if you will, a way to reconstruct and properly construct a life. So I think I gave a pretty good summation. What are the pieces that you wish to add to that as we close out today?
Oh, you did. That is a good summation. I think the idea that, uh, this is not, these are ideas that we have come to understand that are drawn a lot out of our own questioning,
No doubt.
watching, trying to help people get better, but also I think in our own life, our own journeys, we have lived, we've struggled to live this out. Neither one of us are perfect human beings. I mean, being healthy
Chance.
has taken a lot of our energy. We happen to talk about becoming healthy because that's our our vocation as well, but it's also our personal journeys to be healthier. Um, and I know I have not always been that, and so it's personal, not just professional, and that I think is what I like um, with you. Talking with you, working with you. Um, that we can really say it's okay to be in the process. You know, um, we can really say that. And I teach some adjunct in some counseling programs academically, and I find myself always going back to this idea that self-awareness is your number one asset. Self-awareness is your number one asset. Self-awareness, what's going on inside of you, uh, just in daily life, what's going on inside of you when you're in the therapy session, what's going on inside of you. Um, and that's not being so like enveloped and myopic that you're gazing at your navel and you lose touch with reality, but it's just like this is happening. And that self-awareness allows us to navigate the complexity and the imperfections of just becoming mature or becoming wise. You said earlier that you're into the sixth decade, and Erickson said you're not wise till you're into that, you're in that decade. The journey of becoming wise is not one that is always uphill. And um, we can have a lot of mercy and grace for one another,
It's true.
and want to always do that uh, without abandoning a goal or a standard.